After 10 chapters of teaching the multitudes, healing the sick, casting out the demons, and even raising the dead, Jesus goes to Jerusalem for the Passover. 6 of the 16 chapters in the book deal with the final week of Jesus' life, leading up to his death. The last 6 chapters is called the Passion. So the final 6 chapters deal with his final week. So those 6 chapters is his final week of life, and he's going to Jerusalem. We call these last 6 chapters the Passion. Passion comes from the Greek word paschal, which means suffer. So when you watch The Passion of Christ, it meant the suffering of Christ, that movie that I think everybody watched it. So those 6 chapters talks about his passion. Many people, most scholars, think that the book of Mark is a passion narrative with a long introduction. They look at the first 10 chapters as an introduction, but the main meat is the last week, which is the 6 chapters in the book of Mark. So he spends a week in Jerusalem preaching in the temple. He then has a last meal with his disciples, after which he is betrayed by Judas. He's arrested by the authorities. He's denied by Peter. He's put on trial before the leaders and then before the Roman governor Pilate, who condemns him to die on a cross. Let's focus on Jesus' death itself. Up until this point, no one seems to understand who he is. Even those like the disciples who appear to have some inkling have still not realized that to be Messiah means to suffer. It seems that at the end, even Jesus himself is not so sure, because we see him praying 3 times for Yah to remove the fate from him. And I think I posed the question, if this is the assignment, he knew it as we've been taught. He knew it before he came here. He knew that was the assignment, emptied himself to do this. So the cry here of removing the assignment gets a little problematic. Not for Mark, because Mark doesn't see how Matthew and Luke see it. In Matthew and Luke, he is all in. He knows that this is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm here. Mark doesn't portray that. So he prays 3 times for God to remove his fate from him. And then he says, not my will, but your will. He goes through all that. And now he's hanging on the cross. Mark 15:34. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? This is a quotation in Aramaic of Psalms 22 verses 1. This phrase is in Aramaic. When Matthew quotes it, Matthew doesn't quote it as Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. He quotes it as Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. What is happening here is in Mark preserves the Aramaic on Yeshua's tongue. Matthew says the same expression in Hebrew. So Matthew has it in Hebrew, Mark has it in Aramaic. Luke doesn't include these words. I'll explain why. Luke doesn't explain, you don't have Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani in Luke. Mark keeps the Aramaic on Yeshua's tongue. Matthew keeps the Hebrew. on his tongue. And some of them that stood by, when they heard it, said, Behold, he calleth Elias. There have been arguments, debates, that if they spoke Hebrew or Aramaic, they should have understood what he was saying. The whole debate, don't want to go into that because of my time. But that's what's happening. Mark preserves Aramaic, Matthew preserves the Hebrew. Luke doesn't include these words. So he seems, Mark is portraying him as somebody who is a bit shocked of what happens to him. Mark doesn't have the conversations between the thieves. He's just silent. He's saying, take this cup away from me. The other two gospels don't portray him like that. That is why I said we have to look at how Mark sees it. After these sayings, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, the curtain rip. And then somebody finally recognizes who Yesu really is. See, the text starts with people trying to figure it out. Yesu knows, Yah knows, the demons know, you the reader know, the writer knows. But finally, when the curtain rips, somebody finally recognizes who Yesu really is. Who was that? Mark 15:39. And when the centurion, which stood over against him, saw that he so cried out and gave up the ghost, he said, Truly, this man was the Son of God. The pagan centurion was the one, when he heard, seeing Yesu die and proclaiming, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, concludes that truly this man was the Son of God. How he comes to that conclusion, the author doesn't tell us. But it was the pagan centurion who recognized this. 3 days later, so Jesus' identity is finally confirmed at the end of the story, at the end of the Passion, is confirmed. 3 days later, Yeshua's women followers go to his tomb, and it's empty. He has been raised from the dead. In keeping with the theme that Yesu was completely misunderstood, we are told that the women flee the tomb and don't tell anyone because they were afraid. Mark 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Yesu the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. And they were afraid. Okay. Verse 7. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. I pause there because Matthew is going to contradict this, but we'll look at it when we get there. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And the book ends here. Later on, when some scribes were copying the book of Mark, they did not like that the book ends so abruptly. So they added what we call the second ending of the book of Mark. I would show it to you so you have it in the PowerPoint. When the scribe was copying it and he gets to the book of Mark, and it ends abruptly. It doesn't say that the women went to say anything. How can it just end like that? So the scribe or scribes who were writing actually gave a second ending. I'm going to put the screen here so you can see. Okay. So after verses 8, this is the book of Mark 16, verses 8, trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And then you have from verses 9 to 20, but we are told the earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have verses 9 to 20. What happened is because a scribe copying it saw that it ends abruptly. It doesn't say that the disciples got to know anything. It doesn't say that the women went to say anything. It just ends there. So now you have verses 9 to 20. Now, for Mark, Jesus suffered and died precisely because he was the Messiah. That is the writer. Even though people did not understand it, even though maybe probably Jesus himself was shocked of what happened, Mark molded his tradition to make his point that Jesus was an unexpected Messiah, one whose suffering and death were neither accidental nor incidental to his messiahship. For Mark, Jesus suffered and died precisely because he was the Messiah. He doesn't seem to take the stance of Jesus being a prophet like unto Moses. Mark doesn't take that stance. Somebody does. We'll look at that person in part 2. And Matthew really does. But with Mark, he doesn't make that comparison. He doesn't have that tradition. He ends his gospel abruptly. And those that came after him did not like how it ended, so they beefed it up a little. But you have an author showing a progression of revelation, people coming to realize, even though that was not what they were expecting, they came progressively to realize who Jesus was. But Matthew has a different claim. Is Jesus' narrative similar to the life of Moses? Matthew would answer it with a big yes. Now we're going to have to look at Matthew, how he narrates it, the comparisons that he makes. After that, we look at Luke. Does Luke say the same? We come to John. Maybe we'll do John. Does John look at it the same? And then now when we come back to Deuteronomy to answer that question, we know what we are looking at. When we say somebody is like unto Moshe, what really does that mean?